border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
Throws deep downfield for the end zone, a lunging catch, and it's a score for the Herd, Jerron Woodyard. And it is 37-0, and Grant Wells is moving up toward a 300-yard passing performance in the first half. That is his 4th touchdown toss.
Story toward Jackson, got separation to the 20, to the 10, and he will go. Lucky Jackson from 54 yards out.
Pressure off the edge. Screen delivers. What a catch, Levias, who brings it in. Armani Levias to the house. Touchdown, Marshall.
This will be from 52 yards. From the far hash mark. John Haggerty, the punter, will hold. Jared Nash will snap it. It's definitely long enough. It is good! Unbelievable. The true freshman, Corey Munson, hammers it home from 52 yards.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Got a very special, probably extended episode this week. We're going to be wrapping up Marshall's dominating win over UMass. Really wasn't much of a contest. As a matter of fact, it was really just about keeping a game on the schedule because this one was nowhere in doubt. I mean, a minute into the game, 2 minutes into the game, whatever, this one was pretty much over. And we're also going to have an extended, most likely, preview of 75 week, which of course, Middle Tennessee coming to Huntington to face the Herd. And we're going to talk about all that goes into that this week, with it being not just 75 week, but the 50th anniversary, a real milestone anniversary from the 1970 plane crash. So we'll get into all that. We've got a special guest also that's going to be joining us later in the episode to talk about 75 week. But for right now, it's just Trace and me, and we're going to talk about UMass. We're going to talk about how good the Herd looked really across the board in all phases, and what it means ultimately, I guess, for the Herd as they continue to try to keep pace with everybody, remain undefeated and all that kind of stuff as games get canceled and, you know, stuff gets moved around. Marshall just keeps trying to win and keep games on the schedule. So eventually, you know, it's going to be undeniable if Marshall's undefeated, sitting there at 8-0, 9-0, 10-0. I mean, you know, when you've got teams ahead of them with 2 or 3 wins, period. I mean, something's got to give. So let's talk about that, Trace. UMass came in playing in just their second game of the season. We talked about in the preview. They had just been throttled, I think it was by Georgia Southern, 41-0. And we thought we were going to see the same particular type of game against the Herd. We did see that. You actually posed the question, how many points do you think Marshall's first team will give up? Well, they gave them all up, really. They gave up 10 points to the Minutemen, and you can't really put it on the defense. I mean, it's not like that you can. Let me stop myself right there. You can put it on the defense, but it's not like it was a long, sustained drive. UMass got helped out by busted coverage and a couple of bad penalties back-to-back that really just put them right down there on the goal line. They were able to punch it in. So it is what it is. But let's talk about how the game played out as far as numbers go. Total yardage, I mean, it's all lopsided across the board, really. Time of possession was a little closer than you might have figured, but everything else was pretty much lopsided in the Herd's favor. The Herd did sweep the 4 categories. Total yards, 495 for the Herd, 190 for UMass. Time of possession, 33:07 for the Herd, 26:53 for the Minutemen. First downs, good Lord, almost 3-1, 33 for the Herd, 12 for UMass, and turnover margin, 0 for the Herd, 1 for Marshall. Marshall sweeps the 4 indicators, which is always pretty much indicative of a win. 51-10 was your final score. Marshall did not cover, though, and that was a pretty bad beat because the Herd had the opportunity to cover when the backups were in there, and Luke Zaban threw a pass into the end zone, and it was dropped by reserve wide receiver. I think it was E.J. Horton that dropped that late in the game. That could have made the Herd cover, but anyway, they win by 41. They were a 44.5-point favorite coming in. I think they did what they set out to do. They showed that they were a really good team across all phases, and they just dominated the game they were supposed to dominate. Herd defense comes through again, still has not allowed a 100-yard rusher or 100-yard rushing to a team on the season. Only 41 yards given up to UMass as a team. Grant Wells earns Conference USA Offensive Player of the Week honors for his effort, which we'll get into a little bit more later on. Herd stayed right where they needed to in the polls. They didn't move up, but I'm sure if they had not gotten the game this past Saturday, they would have dropped in the polls. So if for no other, piece of positivity, they stayed put. Still 15th in the coaches, 16th in the AP. And, another little bit of a bright spot, we did see the return of Najee Johnson, which can only help this Herd defense moving forward as if they needed any help whatsoever. So, Trace, talk to me about the game. I know you were there. We'll get your general thoughts and feelings, and then we'll talk about stats from these guys and, and then move on to some grades and stuff. So, talk to me about the game.
Yeah, it pretty much went like everybody thought it would. I don't think anybody expected it to be much of a game, and it wasn't. I tweeted at halftime, it was kind of just a going through the motions kind of game. Like, that's all it was, really. Like, it matters because in 2020 matters, but they weren't. It wasn't going to be like the intensity that they're going to play with coming up on Saturday. Let's put it that way. It wasn't ever going to be that. It just wasn't. UMass are not a good football team. They get completely dysfunctional and everything going on this year. But, Marshall took care of business. So, that's really all that matters. And even though they went through the motions through most of that game, they still scored 51 points and still played really well defensively. If it wasn't for trickery, the defense wouldn't have gave up anything as far as I'm concerned. So, that's the only way UMass was able to actually move the ball. And I said that this might be a game where UMass struggles to even get 100 total yards. Well, 32% of their total yards came on those two trick plays. So Just saying, it was very much the case that they just really couldn't move the ball on this Marshall defense. And everybody knew that was going to be how it was going to go. And then as far as Marshall offensively, Grant Wells getting Conference USA Offensive Player of the Week was a little bit surprising. And he had a good stat line, but I thought he was a little bit inaccurate, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
In that second quarter especially, he missed several passes. I was just like, what is going on here? But even at that, he still was 21 out of 30. So, it's not, he missed a few passes he usually doesn't miss, but he was still, that's got to be 65% completion, which gets the job done. He still played well, but, I thought he could have played a lot better than he did, honestly, and he still had a pretty good game. So, offense did their thing. Would have liked to have seen the special teams play a little bit better. But save that for another segment here. But no, as for the most part, though, it was a solid performance. They did what they needed to do. And I know I tweeted it, and a few people were tweeting about that Chuck Landon column about how Marshall having these rent-a-win games isn't a very good technique. I vehemently disagree with that. It's 2020. You need all the games you can get. It doesn't matter who it's against, that you need games in 2020 college football. And Marshall got this one. And like you said, they stayed put in the rankings exactly where they were the week before in both polls. If they wouldn't have played, they probably would have dropped. So, they needed this game. So it was a good win. They did what they needed to do, 6-0. So.
Yeah, back to that point you made about the Chuck Landon article. He's 100% wrong this time. I don't want to chime in and, I don't like arguing with, whatever, reporters and that kind of stuff. But in this instance, he's 100% wrong. Marshall absolutely needed a game on the schedule. It doesn't matter who it is. If it was Huntington High School, they just needed a game on the schedule. Because you're right. Several teams below them played and won. And they emphatically would have dropped in the polls. There's no way around it. These voters look for any reason they can to discredit and discount a G5 program that's doing well. And if a Power 5 team gets a win ranked below you, they're going to move up ahead of you. It's just going to happen. So in this instance, you just kind of got to let that article lie. It's not worth writing because it's a very bad take. But let's move on. Let's talk about stats. Grant Wells, you mentioned 21 of 30. It's pretty good, 2/3 of the way there on completion percentage, 228 yards. That's pretty decent. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's what you really, really like to see. Brendan Knox, 14 carries, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. I think it's his 5th straight game with 100 yards, if I remember correctly. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that's the streak. It might be 6 games in a row. Anyway, we're somewhere in that area. But I think in the second half, he only had 3 carries for 9 yards or something like that. He just didn't need to play.
Yeah.
He did all of his damage really early on. He had a 45-yard run, a minute and a half into the game. cruised basically to a 100-yard game, and then once they reached that plateau and the first half came to an end, there was no need to keep him out there. And we saw that. We saw Knowledge McDaniel get some game. We saw Papillon get in there and get some game. And Sheldon Evans had a nice bust through the line, high step and run for touchdown. McDaniel had a touchdown. So, it's nice game rushing for the Herd. Artie Henry, your leader in the clubhouse receiving yardage-wise, 5 catches for 71 yards, 14.2 yards per reception. Xavier Gaines, your leader in the clubhouse in receptions and receiving touchdowns, 7 catches, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns, including that beautiful one-handed catch that landed him number 8 in the SC top 10 this weekend. And if you'll recall in the preview, Trace, I think one of us, I think it was me, that said this would be a great game for Xavier Gaines to bust back out and show he's a big part of the Marshall offense, and I'll be darned if we didn't see that. Corey Gamage, 3 catches, 41 yards, and a nice touchdown. I think it was like a 13, 14-yard catch and run. Nice little play there and show the speed to get through and around the corner and into the end zone. All in all, 495 total yards for the Herd. Like I said, 3 running backs with at least 1 rushing touchdown. You like to see that. Grant Wells had a pretty good day, and we saw a drop touchdown pass by the reserves. Luke Zaban almost had one. He did tackle on like 30-some rushing yards for himself in his own right. So the Herd's just in a pretty good spot right now to think that they could have won this game, almost putting 60 on the board. When's the last time you can recall, Trace, Marshall putting up 50 points twice in a season? I'd say it's been a while. And it's happened twice this year, and we still have some games on the schedule. It would not surprise me if Marshall put 50 up this weekend as well. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me just because of what we know is going on this weekend and how the Herd always seems to catch a weird wild break or some fluky play, just like we saw against Louisiana Tech last year, that it resulted in some unforeseen scores, we'll call it.
Yeah.
But look, let's talk about defense now. Tavante Beckett back to being his normal self that we are used to seeing week in and week out. 11 total tackles this week. 6 of those solo, half a tackle for loss, 1 pass defended, and a quarterback hurry. How about Eli Neal? Really quietly having a super solid season.
Really
Another
good.
7 tackle effort. 1 of those solo, half a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a pass defended. Abraham Beauplan, 5 tackles, 3 solo, half a tackle for loss. Sam Burton, nice all-around game, 3 tackles, 2 solo, 1.5 sacks, and 1.5 tackles for loss. How about the 4 leading, the 4 guys we feature right there, all linebackers. So not a lot getting through to the second level, third, then the secondary. The front 7 really did their job. For the Herd as a team, 4 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. UMass's leading rusher on the game was running back Ellis Merriweather, 10 carries for 31 of their 41 yards. So the Herd really took care of business, like we said, in the rush game, only 41 yards allowed. I'm going to go ahead and skip real fast to special teams. We'll go back and talk defense as well. Shane Chuchi, 1 of 1 on field goals from 43, 6 of 6 on extra points. And I saw later that he has been put on full scholarship. So congratulations to the Chuchi train. It's rolling along. Congratulations to him. Robert Lefevre, just 1 punt on the day, 51 yards. But the Herd punted twice as a team. Yeah, Grant Wells snuck one in there too. Just happened to roll into the end zone, but nice little effort to try to get a pooch punt in there. So, Trace, you can go back and talk defense, whatever you want there, but I just wanted to run through special teams while we were at it.
Yeah, I mean, defense was just what they are, what they have been. They were dominant for the most part. I mean, when I was at the game, one of my friends was there as well, and I talked to him about this, and I said that this game, this kind of reminds me, this is completely random, and probably not very many Marshall fans will even probably draw this conclusion, but in the 2014 season when Marshall played Southern Miss that year, that was when Marshall was 8 or 9-0 or something like that, and Southern Miss had just been really struggling a lot, the previous couple of years before that, and they weren't very good this year. And I remember they jumped up on Marshall 14-0 in that game at Southern Miss, and that was all from trickery. Like, they went onside kick, they went crazy stuff on offense, and then I said once that novelty wore off, they did nothing. Marshall went on a 63-3 run to end that game, won the game 63-17. Same thing here. Once that novelty ran off of the trick plays, UMass was incapable of doing anything else offensively. I drew the comparisons to that game because it really reminded me of that, because that's the only way either one of those teams was able to do anything on Marshall's defense, either game. So that was very similar in that regard. But offense, looking at them a little bit more, they put up 51 and probably could have put up way more than that. Honestly, you can't be upset with 51 points, but they could have put up probably more points than that, because there were a couple drives there in the first half where kind of just looked a little out of sync. And that goes back to what I said about Grant Wells maybe being a little inaccurate. But then I did the numbers, and 21 to 30, 70%. So, he was a little inaccurate, and he still completed 70% of his passes. So that shows how good he could have really been in this game. But it's from top to bottom, though, outside of just a couple drives here and there where they just looked a little out of sync, kind of going through the motions, they played really well.
Yeah, if you go through the motions and put up 51 and you're a drop touchdown pass from putting up 57 or 58 points, hey, it's not a bad spot to be in. So let's move along to your favorite portion of these recap episodes, and that, of course, is grades. I love the fact that you have been on I won't say you've been on a hot streak. The defense has been on a hot streak, and we'll see if that straight A report card can continue. They're really looking like the honor students flirting with valedictorian for the season so far this year. So let's start off. Grant Wells, you mentioned 21 to 30, 70%. Offensive Player of the Week honors. It's hard to shake what he did, and I'm with you. I was kind of surprised that he got OPOW honors, but I'm not I'm not like, well, he didn't deserve it, because, he played really well, and the Herd put up 51 in what was just a handful of CUSA games that got played. A lot of them were canceled. So what do you got for Grant this week?
Yeah, I gave him a B+ this week. He played well, 21 to 30, like we said. That's a high completion percentage. 228 yards, that's a modest but a solid day. That's more than game manager type. He made some really nice throws. 3 touchdowns and no picks was big, because he had recently had a pick or two basically in each game. So that was nice to see him break out of that. One thing that really surprised me, though, that I saw from ESPN stats, is they only had him at a 47 QBR. I
saw that too.
I thought that was like a typo at first. I was like, 47? That's really low for a high completion percentage and no turnover game. So, that just shows, I guess, sometimes QBR can be a little fickle at times. But and then he also had 29 yards rushing. He ran the ball pretty well. They like to do that zone read with him. A lot of the design runs for him. He really doesn't scramble a lot per se, but they do design runs for him at times. A little inconsistent there in the second quarter. Missed a few throws. I remember he had one, I think it was to Gamage, about a 10, 15-yard route, just threw it high. The pass probably should have been caught, or at least could have been caught, but there was nobody near him. You should have hit him in the numbers on that one. And a couple throws like that here and there in the second quarter. But other than that, though, he did really play well. So I got to give him a B+. It wasn't like a great world beater dominant performance, but it was definitely a quite solid performance. So B+.
Yeah, absolutely a solid performance. And let us keep reminding everyone, that was 6 games into his career. Yeah. So if this were 20 games into his career, this could easily be a 400-yard, 5-touchdown performance, So he's still playing extremely well. But it's so wild that we keep having to curb those expectations by saying, look, man, it's 6 games in. And yeah, I get it. It's a bad team that you're playing, but still, you're gonna have those inaccuracies. Just wait. All those big numbers are gonna come. How about the offense as a whole? We mentioned it several times. 495 yards total offense, flirting with 500, 51 points. Spread it around. 7 guys caught a pass. Several of those guys caught at least 2 passes. 3 running backs found the end zone. Brendan Knox goes over 100 yards for yet another game. So I guess it's business as usual for this Herd offense, maybe?
Yeah, I give him an A. Whenever your team scores 51 points, I don't see how you can give it anything but an A. Whether it was super clean or whether it was perfect or not, 51 points is 51 points. So that's an A in my book. Putting up that many points says a lot. almost 500 total yards, 495 total yards. They had very good balance, 228 passing, 267 rushing. And if you just look at their numbers, they're averaging per game through the air and on the ground, they're very balanced. And like that kind of harps back to maybe that 2014 kind of era where they were extremely balanced that year too. 0 turnovers, you got to like that. 6 of 12 on third downs. They got back to good success on third down. They did not have a great third down performance against FAU. I believe they were like 5 of 13. A week after, they were 13 of 16 against La Tech. So they got back to 50% and above on third downs, which is good. They were about +7 in time of possession. They controlled the clock. 33 first downs. That was a lot. I had to write that one down because that's a lot of first downs. I mean, that's like that's like 2 games worth there.
That's video game numbers, man.
It's video game numbers. I mean, sometimes teams don't even get that in 2 games. So really good performance from the offense, and it could have been better. Like, they had a lot of big numbers, kind of eye-popping stuff, and it really could have been better. Like, first half, or at least second quarter especially, they could have absolutely put up 60 plus 70 maybe if they had really clicked for the whole game. But, I mean, still a really good day, so give them an A.
Yeah, got to give him an A. And look, and also not mentioned, Marshall scored in all 4 quarters. And they scored multiple times in every quarter but the fourth. And, again, a drop touchdown pass late in the game could have led to multiple scores in all 4 quarters. Defense, oh, man, does the streak continue? Under 200 yards allowed as a team, under 50 yards rushing allowed for UMass. The usual suspects are having their way. We're seeing a lot of guys having breakout seasons that we weren't really talking about coming into this season. We thought it might be some different folks. So does the defensive streak of A's continue, Trace?
The defensive streak of A's does continue, but the streak of A pluses does not continue. I give the defense a regular A. Every game this year, they've gotten at least an A+, and actually in the App State, it was an A++, which is the first time ever. But I'm still going with an A. I mean, really dominant performance outside of 2 trick plays, essentially. Only gave up 10 points, all in the trick plays, and like you said, there were a couple penalties in there that kept the drives going longer, too. But 190 total yards, like I said earlier, 32% of those yards came in those 2 plays in the first half. So you can't really ask for much more there. 41 yards rushing allowed, 1.4 yards per rush as a team they allowed. I mean, just completely just stifling the run like they've done all year. That right there can win you games just by itself, dominating the run, stopping the run like that. They were +1 in turnovers, forced a turnover, which was nice. 4 sacks, 10 TFLs. I mean, just swarming again. Just great pressure. I remember that one drive, I think it was late third quarter, I think Sam Burton got in on 2 straight sacks, or at least they counted the one as a half the sack, but he got in both times, and he had a really great series. And like, they have a lot of guys flying around out there on the defense. I mean, they just swarm. Swarming is the best way to describe the Marshall defense this year, and it was on display again. So really good day for the defense. Outside of 2, if it wasn't for two trick plays, it might have been another A+, but it's just an A this week. So
I got a couple of points I want to make, and about the defense specifically. They were inches away from yet another defensive score. We saw a sack fumble picked up and started to be returned, and
he just stumbled a little bit.
Man got blocked into, or a man got put, like hit into his blocker, and he went down. So it is what it is, but the hurt is right there. This is like the 3rd consecutive game we've either seen a defensive score or a really close potential of a defensive score. And secondly, I want to talk about what you mentioned earlier about the novelty of the trick plays. Yeah, you're going to get exploited from time to time. All the best defenses will give up a trick play and if it only happens once or twice a game, so be it. And if that's what you have to do to put yardage up against a real good defense, then okay. But you can't do that for 60 minutes in a football game and expect to win. So there is absolutely no reason for any cause of any slight alarm to look at the score and say, wow, they gave up 10 points to UMass. They're terrible. The first team gave up 10 points to this terrible team. Yeah, there's absolutely no reason to worry about that. This defense still ranks number 1 in the country now at points per game allowed at 9.5. So anytime you're number 1 in the country in any category, you're doing something great. So let's talk special teams. Chuchi 1-1 on field goals, perfect on extra points, essentially one meaningful punt in the game. Yeah, so we talked about Grant Wells' attempted pooch punt, but yeah, it doesn't matter. So what? And Lefevre bangs it out for 51 yards. So anytime your punter's on the field for one or fewer punts, that's now 3 games this season where Lefevre has punted once or fewer times. Pretty amazing. So what do you got for special teams this week? But I know there's some things, that were tweeted in real time. What do you think the grade's going to be? And I remember saying is not ideal a grade. So what do you have for the special teams?
Yeah, it's the lowest grade I've given all year. It's a C+. That's what I gave him. And the only reason I gave him a C+ is because Chuchi made a field goal that basically was the exact same kick that he left short 2 weeks before that. That's the only reason that it was a 43-yard field goal. He drilled it with plenty of room to spare. And the 2 weeks before that, he left a 44-yarder short by a decent amount. So that's the only reason I give it a C+ is because that was impressive. I mean, I'm sure maybe the temperature had something to do with it because it was a lot warmer in this game and it's easier to kick the football maybe. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe he's just getting better with the distance kicks. I don't know. But he's 1-1 on field goals, 6 of 6 on the extra points that he actually got the chance to kick, which I'll get to that here in a minute. 1 punt for 51 yards, good stuff from Lefevre. The fact he didn't have to punt was better than the actual punt itself. Non-existent, though, with kick returns and punt returns. I mean, they really didn't do anything in that aspect. And then there were 2 kickoffs out of bounds. Like, that just bugged the living crap out of me. 2 kickoffs out of bounds. I mean, that's really bad. I mean, if it would have been against a team with a pulse, then, it could have came back to haunt them. But, because it was UMass that didn't, but you just don't like to see that. I think the second one was maybe the opening kickoff. It was the opening kickoff of the second half because I remember everybody was pitch silent and I was screaming about it. So and I wasn't happy about that. And then they had that one botched extra point where I don't know if it was. I guess it was the snap or the hold was off and they didn't get the chance to kick it. So that was just bad, kind of rusty looking stuff there. So special teams were definitely not up to par like they usually are this year, and they've been really solid all year, but this was just a kind of an off game. But I mean, there was the takeaway of Chuchi making a pretty long field goal, so that's a very good sign for the future possibly. So I mean, if there was a game to have a relatively off game, I guess it would be this one. So C+.
Yeah, I can, speak to the bad extra point. I saw, they had the replay on TV and it was quite obvious that it was a good snap. It just went through Lefevre's hands and kind of hit him in the face mask and there was no way to recover and get the ball down. So it was just one of those things, it happens. But the more concerning thing should be consecutive kickoffs out of bounds because in a tight game, that's something that will absolutely bite you. So, and I can tell you somebody else who was not pleased with that, and that was one John Holiday because he was visibly frustrated, and the announcers on TV, Mark Martin and Jake Griffith, were talking about that quite a bit. So he did not appreciate that whatsoever. All right, let's talk about the coaching. Look, we're going to talk about it again. 51 points, 495 yards racked up, 190 yards allowed, yada, 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 yada. Excellent game plan, in my opinion, against a team that really had no fight in them for what Marshall brings to the table. But what do you got for the coaches anyway?
Yeah, I gave them a B+. I thought they were good for sure. Only things that I would kind of wish I would have seen a little different is it looked like they kind of, like I said, the team was just kind of going through the motions in the first half. I mean, it's not that they weren't playing hard. It's just that they just kind of looked like they were just kind of there, not necessarily playing with a great level of intensity. Maybe they heard all the talks about how great they are and how UMass is terrible and whatever, and they kind of just looked like they were sleepwalking a little bit. Would have liked to have seen them come out a little bit sharper. Another thing is I would have liked to have seen in the first half, especially, getting Brendan Knox the ball more. Every time he touched the ball, it was something good was happening, but I think he only had 14 carries for the game, and in the first half, Grant Wells, or at least in that second quarter, primarily was a little bit off target. So, I would have liked to have seen Knox get the ball more. Then, I think he could have had, if he would have got a few more carries, he could have been closer to, 175 yards, 200 yards. If he would have gotten a couple big runs in there. So, I would have liked to have seen that personally. But, I get why they didn't. It's not like they needed to give him 30 carries against UMass. So, I kind of get that. And they did play much cleaner in the second half, defense especially. Not that they played unclean in the first half. It's just they got bit by a couple of trick plays. They took everything out. They completely took them out of their game in the second half. UMass did nothing offensively in the second half. The touchdown drive that ended the first half was very impressive, because at that point it was only 24-10, and it was a little bit like, okay, this half's kind of lackluster, but then they punched it in the end zone with no problems at all to end the first half and go up 31-10. That was impressive. That kind of set the tone for the second half a little bit. And they got a lot of guys reps. They got a lot of young players in there, and especially in the fourth quarter. Luke Saban looked pretty good at quarterback like he did against Eastern Kentucky. Freaking Knowledge McDaniel. I'm excited about this guy. Here's this. This might be a little bit of a hot take here, but as much as I appreciate and really think Sheldon Evans is a really good player and a great leader and just a great teammate, I think Knowledge McDaniel might be a little better running back than he is. I honestly, the way he runs, he just runs different. He kind of reminds me of Knox a little bit. Knowledge McDaniel is going to be a star. Whenever Knox is gone or whatever, I would not be surprised at all to see him pick up right where he left off. So just keep that in mind. I think he's an absolute star. So that was good that they got a lot of guys reps. So coaching, I'll give him a B+.
All right. Well, the overall grade has to be pretty good. Your lowest is a C+, and it's such a small part of the game that it can't really factor in that much. But before we move to that, look, I got to talk about Knowledge McDaniel too. I love watching this dude run.
Yes.
You're right. He just looks a little bit different. 5'11", 218 pounds. Love the build. Love the body type, speed and power. I'm with you. I think the kid needs to get a few more. They ought to be giving him at least 1 or 2 carries every game. You got to work him. I mean, every game, let him get a carry or 2 in. What's it going to hurt? Especially if you're up big or you've got a big enough lead that you don't need to keep Knox in the game. Why keep him in there? Evans should be getting his carries as well, but what's it going to hurt to keep McDaniel, getting that game action every single game? That's only going to benefit him. So get him in there for a carry or 2 and let him tote the rock late in the game if the game's well in hand. But let's move on to that overall grade, Trace. What do you got this week?
Yeah, overall I got B+. I mean, it was a solid performance. Nothing that's going to make you necessarily think that Marshall's going to win the national title or anything, but it was a very solid performance against a bad team. They did what they needed to do. All sides of the ball had good moments. Offense and defense were very good or great. Well, sort of great, I guess. And the special teams were kind of lackluster, but like I said, the big takeaway is Chuchi making that longer field goal, because a lot of people, everybody was saying that they didn't think he had the leg for kicks that were 40, 45 yards or whatever. It's keep him inside 40 yards, he can make them. He's always on target. But once he starts getting up in that 40, 45 plus yard range is where he starts losing his distance. So that was good to see. Like I said, every part of the team had good things happen from it. They didn't fall in the rankings because they played. So that's a good sign right there. 6-0. So they got a biggest game of the year coming up so far. So good game, B+.
Yeah, solid effort. Heard 6-0, 3-0 in conference. Middle Tennessee, I'm not even going to say Middle Tennessee looms, because I don't think they pose much of a threat for Marshall this year. But, we'll talk about that. The Raiders have had the Herd's number for the past couple of years. It's just one of those weird Conference USA stats. But, hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to be previewing 75 week, all that means for the Herd, all that means for these players, fans, and the community, as well as college football at large. And we're going to bring in a special guest that is going to be making a repeat appearance on the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. So stick with us. It's all coming up after the break. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
Red, it doesn't matter if we win or if we lose. It's not even about how we play the game. What matters is that we play the game. That we take the field, that we suit up on Saturdays and we keep this program alive. We play the game. Red, and I'm telling you, one day, not today, not tomorrow, not this season probably, not next season either, but one day you and I are going to wake up and suddenly we're going to be like every other team in every other sport where winning is everything and nothing else matters. And when that day comes, well, that's when we'll honor them.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. It's preview time. Middle Tennessee State coming to Huntington this week. It's 75 week in the Mountain State, and more importantly, in the River City of Huntington. 50th anniversary. It's hard to believe it's been 50 years since the 1970 plane crash, of course, immortalized in the film We Are Marshall, something that the Marshall community, students, past and present, alumni, players, everybody that's ever been associated with the green and white hold very near and dear to their heart. I've said many times that if you are affiliated with Marshall, the plane crash and all that goes into it is part of your fabric. It becomes part of you in some way. No matter how big or how small, it does become a part of you. So this will be something really, really special to talk about. The game this week, it almost becomes secondary. It almost just becomes, not an afterthought, but it's not the marquee thing happening this week. It's a little bit smaller, which is weird to imagine, but it's a little bit bigger than football this week. And to help document that, on the Moonshine Throwdown podcast, we've got a very special guest returning to the show, the man that is responsible largely in part for a lot of the content that you see in and around Marshall's official athletics accounts as far as videos and graphics and things like that go. Casey Knopf is back on the show with us to talk about his experiences with 75 week, and being that he's so close to the program and involved, like I said, with the creation of a lot of content. And he's just a big damn Marshall fan, a student as well. We're going to get his take on a lot of different topics regarding 75 week and what it means. Of course, Trace is still here with me. Casey, welcome back to the show, man. It's good to have you. This is the first time you've been on that I've also been available to be on, so this is going to be fun for me as well. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Yeah, I'm glad that you're on here today too. It's nice. I mean, we've talked in private and we've had conversations before, but it's nice to be able to do it on the podcast finally.
Yeah, I mean, I love having people on the show, and you're right. You and I have conversed a couple of times on separate occasions about different things, but this is something super, super special. So I was not going to miss this at all. We, no matter what we had to do, we had to work a time out to where we could all be here together. And, well, luckily we were able to do that. So let's talk first about the game, and then we'll just spend the last part of this preview talking about 75 week as a whole and what it means. So let's talk about Middle Tennessee State. Coming into town, Power Index loves the Herd in a home game this week, guys. 96% chance to win. I guess that means Middle Tennessee is just slightly better than UMass. Jab number one at the Raiders. The Herd is a minus 23.5 point favorite. Also a big plus for the Herd. Over under at this game, 57 if you're into that type of betting thing. Now here's the thing. All-time series for the Herd and the Raiders, 5-4 in favor of Marshall. But Middle Tennessee State has won the last two games, and in doing so, effectively keeping Marshall out of the Conference USA title game both years. Middle Tennessee State, though, just 2-5 on the year. They've won games over not very good FIU and getting better Rice, but that was a 2 overtime affair just 2 weeks ago. Last week, their game against Charlotte was postponed, which means Middle Tennessee has had 2 weeks to essentially prepare for Marshall. I guess big notes surrounding this game. Of course, we mentioned it's the 50th anniversary. It's 75 week. We all know the Herd takes it up a notch that week. And I'm calling this a must-win game, not because of the opponent, but because this is the only game on the schedule that, and Doc Holliday has said it, you have to win. You have to win 75 week. You can't go in and lose that game. And he's been really successful at winning these games. So let's talk about going in, what it looks like. Casey, we'll bring you in here first. What do you think this game has the feeling like as far as the game itself? Nothing else. With the plane crash and 75 week and all that stuff. But just as far as the matchup goes, I mean, does Middle Tennessee State really pose much of a threat for the Herd? We'll talk about general thoughts, and then we'll talk about players to look out for. But what does this game strike you looking at from the surface?
I mean, I want to say this respectfully as I can to anybody in the conference, but this Marshall team is different from any team in the recent past. Including 2014, we're loaded everywhere. This team, mentality-wise, is on another level. The focus, the way they approach each week, as basically they're going into the game. It's 0-0. I mean, they're just trying to win on Saturday. And then on top of that, you look at last year. I know we lost to Charlotte at the end of the year, but there's probably going to be some revenge for last year losing the middle. I think that most people would agree Marshall shouldn't have lost the middle last year. So, outside of the 75, there's a lot of things that that Marshall has to play for this week. You gotta be 1-0 at the end of Saturday. It doesn't matter this week. It means more, but you gotta be 1-0 at the end of Saturday. We need to show why we are a top 20 football team in the nation. That this isn't a gimmick. That any other year it wouldn't matter. We're still a top 20 football team. And I think that they're going to do that. I would not be shocked if you see Marshall come out and play some of the best football they've played all year on Saturday.
Yeah, we see that season in and season out when it comes to 75. We always talk about those weird, wild plays that never happen on any other week except for this week. We've seen it in just about every season that I can remember watching a Marshall game. There's always some weird, wild play or sequence of plays or something that happens that goes in the favor of the herd. And, from an X's and O's standpoint, what Middle Tennessee does well, Marshall does even better on the defensive side of the ball. So this just is not a matchup that favors Middle Tennessee, in my opinion. Trace, what do you think? Broad strokes about this game? Does it seem like is this the game? Is this the game that we always circle every year and you go, all right, this is the one that could be the trip up game? Is that what this is for you or no?
No, this isn't that for me. I mean, I do give Middle Tennessee a little bit of respect this year, particularly just because I really think their quarterback's good. I like Asher O'Hara. I saw what he did to Marshall last year. I mean, if you look at the numbers, and he is their offense essentially. Yep. Like he is. He runs the ball effectively. He's very good with his feet. I mean, he's not like a great passer per se, but like he does that at times pretty well. I mean, he's a very nice kind of balanced quarterback. So like he's the only reason I give them even a shred of respect in this game. But even at that, I just don't think this is going to be their week. I mean, it's going to be tough to say the least. I mean, Marshall's going to be at a completely different level. We all know this. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. And over the last 6-7 years since they really implemented this 75 theme more for this game, the teams haven't even been close, really. I mean, I think the closest game might have been Western Kentucky, and it was a 7-point game. But other than that, every game for 75 week, it's basically been a blowout, complete just washout. So, I mean, I would expect something similar. I mean, Marshall's playing really well. Middle Tennessee's not very good. If you just look at the numbers, I mean, like you said, they haven't really beaten anybody with a pulse. Their defense gives up a lot of yards. They really give up a lot on the ground. And Marshall runs the ball really well. They have a dominant O-line. So, like, I just don't see how Middle is going to be able to stop Marshall in this game. At least, I mean, if you want to look at maybe they might have a little success against the pass, I don't see how they have any success against the run. So, I think from an X's and O's standpoint, Marshall's the clear-cut favorite in this game, the clear-cut better team. But then if you want to get into all the other stuff, takes it to a new level, really.
Yeah, you talked about Asher O'Hara. I'm with you. I think he's one of the finer quarterbacks in the conference, but he can't do it all, especially against a defense that's this freaking fierce. And you talked about them not being able to beat any team with a pulse. They beat FIU. They beat Rice. Rice is a little bit better than they were a year ago. Yeah. But, for the purposes of this podcast, the people who really listen to us, Herd fans and Western fans, Western beat Middle Tennessee as well in Murfreesboro. And Western is kind of struggling this year. So that kind of tells you a lot. That was the most complete game that we've seen from the Hilltoppers was against Middle Tennessee, and they were able to come out with a victory. As a matter of fact, Terrell Pigram was Offensive Player of the Week coming out after that game. So the Middle Tennessee defense they're just not that stingy. I mean, we're going to talk about some other players here as well, but we're going to start with Asher O'Hara, of course, number 10, the quarterback. You said he leads the team in rushing. He leads the team in passing. If you can do anything, stop that guy, and you're pretty much going to win the game. The 6-foot, 185-pound junior, 144 out of 221 on the year, 1,509 yards, 11 touchdowns, but 8 interceptions. Here you go. He's been sacked 18 times in 7 games. So that's a very, very bad indicator when you're facing a defensive front like Marshall's bringing. Rushing, he's like I said, the leading rusher, 139 carries, 476 yards, and another 6 touchdowns on the ground. Leading rusher from a running back standpoint, number 5 running back Chatton Mobley, the 6'1", 229-pound junior, 59 carries, 299 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. They got a couple of wide receivers that could bite you a little bit, but nobody that just screams lethal. Number 9 wide receiver Jaron Pierce, probably their biggest weapon, 5'11", 190-pound senior, 46 catches, 451 yards, just 2 touchdowns through the air. Only good for 9.8 yards per reception. But number 89 wide receiver Yusuf Ali, another small little speedster guy. That's what they seem to always have at Middle Tennessee. These 5'9", 5'10", sub 200-pound receivers. And Ollie's in that mold. 5'9", 179-pound junior. 24 catches is your second leading receiver on the team. 341 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he does have a good 14.2 yard per reception average. Look, what does the Herd got to do to win this game? Now, I want to remind you of the stat line of Asher O'Hara in 2019. You mentioned it. So here's what he did in 2019 against the Herd, who also boasted a pretty good defense last year. 261 yards through the air and 1 touchdown, 76 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown. So what does the Herd defense have to do to get, or what do you think this Herd defense is going to do? Not what do you think they have to do. What do you think they're going to do against this Middle Tennessee State offense? What do you think, Case?
Once again, I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but Marshall needs to play their game. They just need to play the way they do. Defensively come out. I mean, I think I was talking about this weekend too. The amount of different looks that our defense shows teams, it's just like, oh my gosh. And when you brought up the sack numbers, it's like, we did have a good defense last year, but I think this defense is just another level. I think you got to stop O'Hara. You got to contain him. You got to not let him do too much. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he can run. So, I would say it's like a sticky approach, right? Like once you get your hands on him, just don't let him go. And I think that you're going to see that a lot this weekend. I think Marshall defense is going to be all over him. I think it's going to be a tough night, or tough day. I'm sorry, we're playing at noon. It's going to be a tough day. And I just think if you're Marshall, I think you saw it a little bit in the first half with UMass, kind of coming out slow. You got to come out like you did in the second half. They came out, they played with a purpose. They played their ball, and then you saw what happened. I mean, UMass didn't do much. So I think that's the type of attitude they got to come out with this week. Play their game and just limit O'Hara really in extending plays. I think the straight up stuff will be fine. Just don't let him get the outside and make some crazy stuff happen.
Trace, surely you mirror a lot of those thoughts and a lot of that strategy, but what do you think we'll see from this Herd defense?
Oh, absolutely. It starts and ends with them containing Asher O'Hara. I mean, if they do that, if he goes out there and, throws 2 or 3 picks, or he can't beat you with his feet, Middle Tennessee is going to really struggle in this game. And, I mean, when you were listing off those numbers that he put up against Marshall last year, one thing that came to my mind immediately was I think Marshall had 5 turnovers in that game. So, that gives you a lot of extra opportunities to put up those yards. So, if Marshall offensively didn't turn the ball over as much as they did, he probably would not have had the game that he had. So, that's another way to look at that. But, I mean, that's not to discredit him because he's a great playmaker. But, I mean, I think Marshall, it's like Casey said, if they just play their game, then I think they'll be in good shape because we know what they're good at defensively. They're good at hashtag grabbing sacks. They're good at just swarming. I mean, that's what they do. That's Marshall. That's Marshall's defense. And if they just keep doing that, I mean, then they'll be in great shape. So they really have to just focus on what they're already good at, and don't let O'Hara beat them again. Which, like I said, not all that was on the defense last year. So yeah, that's pretty much it though.
So let me toss out the stat line from earlier in the season when Western and Middle locked up, okay? O'Hara passed for 217 yards and 1 touchdown, and he ran for another 98 yards and 1 touchdown, and they lost 20-17. He is their offense. But let me tell you what the biggest thing to me this game screams for the Herd defense. This game screams the first guy slow him down until the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth guy can get there to plant him in the turf. That's what it screams to me. Just slow down the momentum of the play until this swarming Herd defense can rally the troops and plant him into the Jones turf. That's exactly what it says. So let's talk about some of this defense that Middle Tennessee's bringing to try to slow down these Herd runners. Yeah, I said that with a chuckle. I just don't think that's going to happen. But it starts, look, they do have some playmakers, and it starts with number 3 safety, Greg Great Jr., the 5'11", 186-pound junior. Pretty good season. Now, he's got to be the guy you've got to circle and say, okay, we got to know where this guy is on every play. Because he's got a loaded season stat line. 61 total tackles, 34 of those solo, 1 sack, 3 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery, all from the safety position. Their second leading tackler is also a safety, number 12, Reed Blankenship. Again, he's been there forever. 6'1", 200-pound senior, 57 total tackles, 28 solo, and 1 pass defended. Couple or a linebacker you need to know, number 20, DQ Thomas, 6'2", 218-pound senior, 51 total tackles, 22 solo, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. And a corner that you need to be aware of, number 33, DeCorian Patterson, 6 foot, 184-pound sophomore. Another really good solid stat line from the season for him. 34 total tackles, 22 solo, 2.5 sacks, an interception, a forced fumble, and 4 passes defended. So they got a really good safety and a really good corner that are putting up those impact plays far beyond just tackles. But as a team, Middle Tennessee State has 17 team sacks, 6 team interceptions, 6 team, not 16, 6 team interceptions, 7 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries in 7 games. They're giving up 37.1 points per game as a defense and allowing 443 yards. Total offense, 245 of those on the ground. Holy crap. Trace, we're going to start with you this time. What do you think we're going to see from this Herd offense?
A lot of daggone success, I would hope. I mean, just looking at it from the middle run defense perspective, they give up 246 rushing yards a game. Okay? Like, this is against Marshall that has one of the best offensive lines in the country, Group of 5 or Power 5. I don't really care what you want to look at it. It's one of the best offensive lines in the country. They have, a phenomenal running back in Brendan Knox, who is the best running back in the Conference USA, one of the best in the country. Again, Group of 5 or Power 5. I don't like separating the two. He's one of the best, period. They have just a lot of options there. I mean, it's the Marshall's running game. I mean, it's putting up over 200 yards rushing a game from their side of things offensively. So, I mean, I just don't see a way that Middle can match up with that. I mean, I just don't think their D-line can compete with that Marshall O-line. I think Knox will have a big game. I think Evans could have a big game. Whoever they put back there, I think will have a big game running the ball. So that's one way to look at that. And then if your defensive line can't penetrate through the Marshall O-line, then Grant Wells is going to have all day to throw the ball too. And if Marshall starts running the ball really well, that's going to open up the play action game, going to open up the passing game to try to go deep with Artie Henry or Corey Gamage or whoever they want to look at. He's got a lot of options there. Willie Johnson's back now. I don't know about Talik Keaton. I don't know his status. He hasn't been in there for a while. But, I mean, other than Brock Thompson, all the receivers could be back, and that's probably even less good news for Middle Tennessee's defense. So I think – but it has to – like it pretty much every game for Marshall, though, I think it has to start with the run, and I think they will pass that with flying colors in this one.
Yeah. Even if Keaton can't get healthy enough to be back, Marshall has shown that they are so deep at wide receiver that, that ultimately they're going to be okay. Casey, what do you think we're going to see from this Herd offense?
Yeah, I mean, Trey said it all pretty well. I just would point out, we ran 5 running backs against UMass on Saturday. All 5 of them are really, really good. We have one of the best offensive lines in the country. You give up that many rushing yards a game, you give up that many points. you're going to have a long, long day when you play Marshall's offense. They're good, they're efficient, and I think that's what you're going to see Saturday is just efficiency.
Yeah,
in both areas, running and passing the football.
It just doesn't, like I said, it just doesn't look like a good matchup for Middle Tennessee. And you hate to pile on, but you got to call it what it is. This is not ideal for them. And you throw into the fact that they're going to run into the buzzsaw that is 75 week, and this could just get real out of hand. We know historically that's not how Doc Holliday, coaches a game. He's not in there to run up the score. But on the same token, he's not going to not score through 3 quarters, especially if the defense can't stop you. What do you expect them to do? Just kneel the ball and then punt? No, that's not going to happen. So it's going to fall on that Middle Tennessee State defense to freaking stop this Herd offense. If they can't do it, that's their own damn problem. So let's move to some specifics. Trace, what do you think the Herd has got to do to get a win in this game? Give me those keys to victory.
Well, first thing I wrote down, and this pretty much is a given every year in this game, but they have to use the emotion in this game to their advantage. And they've done a great job of doing that over the last 6 or 7 years since they implemented the 75 decals on the helmets and started really putting a huge emphasis on this game. They've done that. They've used the emotion well. They've came out really strong for the most part. They finished the games. They've just played really well. And sometimes in football games, emotion can be a bad thing, but in this game, when Marshall's playing for the 75, I think that's good emotion, and I think that's emotion that brings them as a team to a different level. So I think they got to use that to their advantage, and I have no doubt that they will. Like literally, not 1 ounce of doubt at all that they will do that. They're going to do that extremely well, I think, in this one. Next point I wrote down is, and I kind of alluded to this a minute ago, run it down their throat. They give up 246 rushing yards a game. Just absolutely gash them. I mean, that's what they need to do in this one. Because if the running game's going, the entire offense is going more times than not. So, I mean, I don't see Middle Tennessee really be able to step up to that, stop that. Brendan Knox could have if he gets enough carries, and he only had 14 carries against UMass or whatever it was, and if he gets his normal amount of 20, 25 carries or even more than that, he could have a massive game in this one. So I could see them really just dominating in that aspect, and I think that they probably will. The next point is, which we've said it the whole podcast so far, contain O'Hara. I mean, you're not necessarily going to stop him because it's hard to stop a guy that is their entire offense. I mean, he's gonna be out there. He's gonna be putting the ball through the air. He's gonna be running the ball. So you're not going to completely stop him necessarily, but you can key in on him and probably extra key in on him and everybody because there's not necessarily a whole lot of other people in that offense that you should be worried about. I'm not saying they don't have good players on offense, but he's by far their offense. He makes it go. And even when he goes, like you said, that game when he had a good stat line against Western, he only scored 17 points. Now, I don't know about the turnovers or whatever in that game, but if Marshall can get back there and force some turnovers and, swarm like they always do, then they'll be in fine shape for this one defensively. I think they will be able to contain him. And then my last point is, which this is just as of a recent one from this last game, but I think they need to clean up the special teams a little bit. I mean, they've been good all year, but it was just kind of an off game for you against UMass. A couple kickoffs out of bounds, the mess up on the extra point, whatever stuff like that. So if they can get that stuff cleaned up, then they'll be just fine through the special teams, and I think they will. I mean, that's probably just an anomaly. I don't really expect that to continue. Everything else has been sound all year for the most part. So clean up special teams, then that's another. If they get the special teams working again, that's another aspect of the game that Marshall has a decided advantage in. So that will be a big one there to help them push them over the top in this one.
Just one point to drive home the fact of what you talked about turnovers in that Middle Western game. Western actually had 1 turnover, Middle had none, and they were still only able to put up 17 points. So there's your telling stat right there. Casey, if you got some points to victory for the Herd, I'd love to hear them. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Trey said. I think what's important this week is, and historically Doc does this well, but don't lose sight of the moment. Don't get lost in it. We're still a nationally ranked football team. Play our game. I think you're exactly right. We were a little sloppy on special teams on Saturday. Having some guys out doesn't help. So hopefully another week of getting after it fixes some things. I think defense again, first half, just come out with the fire early. Don't wait a half. Don't give them any chance. Make this pretty much done in the first quarter. Let them know what tone we're bringing. Don't give them any life. And that we should handle them with ease.
Well, I can't say as you're wrong, and I really like the sentiment of like just bullying the snot out of them in the first quarter. It would make me feel good to see, we talk about things like, wow, Marshall had 200-yard rushers or something like that. I would think it would be awesome if you could take care of business so early that these reserve backs, for lack of a better term, get so much playing opportunity that you might see something like 300-yard rushers. You know what I mean? Because we know that Evans can do it. We know that McDaniel can do it. And we've seen Papillon get in there. And these guys, if they can just bust out a big long run or something, it is not out of the realm of possibility to see Marshall rack up 400 rushing yards as a team if that's what's working. I'm not saying it'll happen, but it could. For me, the herd to win, it's pretty easy. Trace, you said it's my number one thing too. You stay focused and you harness the emotion. And the herd has been really good at doing that, not just during this game, but this entire season. They've stayed focused and played their game. They never really worry about the opponent. They do what they do, and it's been working. Number two, again, we agree. You got to run wild. If Middle Tennessee can't stop the run, then that's exactly what you need to do. And I'm pretty sure that nobody goes deeper at offensive line and running back than Marshall does. So, I mean, you can take the running backs out of the equation, and Grant Wells can run the ball well. Xavier Gaines can run the ball well, and we've seen what guys like Willie Johnson can do when they do jet sweeps and things like that too. So they can get you from a number of different ways. Number three for me, this is more of a game plan strategy type thing, and it goes along with stopping Asher O'Hara and containing him. I think maybe we could see Marshall have some success if they play those defensive backs a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage this week instead of giving those big cushions, because we know there's not really that vertical threat from Middle Tennessee. So why not take your chances, at least maybe early on, and see if that can give you some success at containing O'Hara's ability to get the outside edge and bust a big gain. And number four, the last point, Casey said it, and I totally agree with it. I wrote this down before we started. Never ease up. Put your foot on the gas and do not stop until the clock is at all zeros. And if you look up and the score is 63-3, then so freaking be it. All eyes are going to be on the herd this week. We've talked about 75 week. We've talked about them being a top 15, 16 team in the nation. This is a subpar opponent. Marshall should absolutely dominate if they're able to. This is the point in the season where they have to. You can't be the nice guy. If you can put up 60, you need to put up 60. There's several G5 teams, which is a term that we hate, that are vying for those eyes in the nation. Liberty's an independent, but they're getting lumped in with teams like Marshall and BYU and Coastal Carolina. And Cincinnati. So it's a 5-team, non-P5 race for those eyeballs, and you've got to keep pace. So who's your 200 proof player this week, Trace? We'll start with you. Who's your guy for 75 week?
Yeah, I'm going on the defensive side of the ball for this one. I picked Darius Hodge, and I think he's going to have a big game. I mean, the guy just is a sack. That's just what he is. He just gets to the quarterback. That's just what he does. He's so quick off the edge, so consistently beats his man, gets past the lineman, swarms to the quarterback, gets him down. That's just what Darius Hodge does, and I expect the same to happen again this time because I don't really think Middle has a very good O-line. I think Marshall front seven and D-line in particular can be able to do some work on them. I'd like to see Darius Hodge go out there, maybe get a couple sacks, 2 or 3 sacks. I mean, it's possible. He had a 4-sack game last year or whatever it was. So he's definitely capable of doing this, and I think that he'll have a very big game in this one. I'd like to see him get in there. Like I said, 2 or 3 sacks would be great. So I'm going to go with Darius Hodge for that one.
Love the defensive pick this week. Casey, do you have a 200 proof player? Who's your guy this week?
I got Grant Wells this week. I think he's going to have a massive week. I think the run game is going to open things up early for him. It took him a little bit to get going this past weekend. I think he's going to be throwing the ball everywhere this weekend. So I'm looking for Grant to be phenomenal this weekend.
Yeah, be a big breakout opportunity 75 week coming off a fresh offensive player of the week performance. Not a bad pick for me. Hey, I'm picking strength on weakness. Give me Brendan Knox. Give me close to a 200-yard day early, maybe the first half. Getting really close to that 160, 70, maybe 180 yards, and then calling it a game. Getting him out, keeping him healthy. But I like Brendan Knox to just dominate. We talked about the revenge factor in this game. Marshall kind of owes Middle Tennessee 1 or 2 for the past couple of seasons. I just don't see any reason to take it easy on these guys, given what this week is and what Middle Tennessee's done to the Herd and their season hopes for the past couple of years. How about a score prediction? Trace, what do you got this week?
Yeah, I have a Marshall comfortable win here. Like I figure everybody does. I have Marshall winning 41-17. Only reason, quite frankly, when I give Middle 17 is because I like Asher O'Hara. Like I give him enough respect to where I think he'll be able to do a little bit. I mean, not enough, not even close to enough in all regards, but I think he'll do some. I mean, and part of that 17 points, one of those touchdowns might be in garbage time. We talked about that a lot this year. Because the games are already in hand, they put in the third string, backups to backups type deal, and they give up a touchdown. That's just sometimes what they do. Can't help that. I mean, that's young guys getting in playing time. It's more valuable than if you keep the starters in, put it that way. So, I mean, I think Marshall should have no problems in this game. I mean, the only reason Middle's beat them in the last 2 years is because of turnovers. I mean, if you look at it, especially last year, it was all turnovers. And the year before that was Alex Thompson making his first career start. So, I mean, stuff, has gone against Marshall in the middle game. And this year, they have them on 75 week. I mean, you can't ask for much more than that. And the last time Marshall had Middle Tennessee on 75 week, they beat them 42-17 in 2016. That was 2016 Marshall. That was a bad football team. They still beat the brakes off of them in that game. And Middle was a pretty good team that year. So, I mean, they should have no problems in this game. And, I mean, I have, of course, a little bit more to add on to about the 75 week later on, but as far as this game, yeah, Marshall should win with no problem.
Yeah, and Casey, I'm going to get your score prediction here, and I know you're going to preface this once again by saying I don't mean to be disrespectful. And look, it's not disrespectful. If you're a subpar team against a higher quality team, it's not disrespectful. It's just truth. So with that disclaimer out there, what do you got this week as a score prediction?
56-3.
Oh, damn! Maybe that is disrespectful.
I think Marshall has played very few games this year where they dominated for all 4 quarters. We've talked about it where we put backups in, we've let off the break. I think this is we haven't had many back-to-backs this year because of COVID and things. We've had games canceled. We're starting to get the ball rolling. There's some consistency. I would say it's not going to be close. It's never going to be close. It's never going to feel close. And I don't think Middle's going to have a very fun day Saturday.
Well, I am more
yeah.
Respectfully, I'm more along the lines with Trace. I respect Asher O'Hara and his ability to put some points on the board. I also think that Stockstill's got nothing to lose, so you might see a little bit of that early trickeration to kind of leap out early and get a lead on Marshall and just see what kind of happens. And if that kind of works, you might see the Raiders go up early, 3-0, 7-0, and then the Herd kind of take the lead back. But I like this to be an easy win ultimately at the end of the day for the Herd, 48-17. I mean, it just doesn't feel like there's any real challenge here unless it's the turnover bug just pops up and Marshall can't hold on to the ball. But I still think they could go, -2 in the turnover ratio and still win this game fairly easily. So give me the Herd 48-17. Herd stays unbeaten, beats a subpar opponent, 4-0 in conference, moving one step closer to the Conference USA title game. All right, look, we've talked about the game, and I prefaced the preview episode saying that the game is almost secondary this week, and it is. And that's why we're talking about the game first, because there are bigger things to talk about this week, and that, of course, it's 75 week. And then when you talk about the fact that it's the 50-year milestone anniversary of the 1970 plane crash, something that, you cannot overstate its presence and its place in Marshall history, not just Marshall athletics history, but Marshall University history, Huntington history, college football history, and American sports history. It's just a big event, and it's not necessarily something you want to be known for, but Marshall has done such a phenomenal job of embracing it and owning it and honoring it that you just have to pay attention to what they do in Huntington this week. And, there are some media leaders in the country and in the world that chose not to do that for whatever reason. And I know you guys have some thoughts about that. We've talked about it, in private, and we've seen it on social media for several weeks now. But let's just talk about 75 week and what it means. I know you wanted to make sure you had your thoughts collected and you wanted to articulate everything that you wanted to say. So, guys, I'm going to let you do that. I'm just going to step aside kind of uninterrupted. Casey, since you're our guest this week, you wanted to come back on the show specifically for this week, and I said absolutely, no problem whatsoever. You wanted to drive home some points and some things you wanted to talk about, and I want you to be able to do that. So this is your time, my man. Whatever you want to talk about, 75 week, whatever points you want to get across, emotions, whatever, it's all yours.
Yeah, it's a big week for our fan base and for our school and for our town. It's a tough week too. It doesn't get any easier. As a 23-year-old, it happened 27 years before I was even on the planet. But I still feel it. I don't just feel it this week. I feel it every day. I filmed the intro this year, and I went up there, and I did it last year too, filming up there at the cemetery, filming at the fountain, and it doesn't get any easier. Most of the time it gets harder. It's emotional, and the tough thing is when we tweet about it. I've seen it happen on Moonshine Throwdown. I've seen it happen on the game day post. Other fan bases come in and they say things, and they clearly don't get it. And I think I don't know if they're trying to be hurtful or if they're just internet trolls. But it's real for us. This week is hard for us. It's not easy. It's very, very much not about the game itself. It's more about the fact that we're so damn lucky that we even have a team that's going to take the field Saturday. I think people lose sight of that. It was very real that Marshall may not have ever had a football team again after that accident. What does that mean? When we say that stuff, what does that mean? Trace, I'm sure you have a ton of memories. Katie, I'm sure you have a ton of memories of Marshall games. I think about all the memories I have with my family, with my dad, my brother, my mom. There's a chance that stuff could have never happened. It's tough. You think about the families. You think about kids that grew up that didn't have a mom and a dad. You think about parents that lost their kids. 20 years old, 19, 21-year-old kids, man, that went to play football and just didn't get to come home. It's tough. It's tough to think about. It's still tough to live with, even though I'm not 100% connected. Through the school I'm connected, and through the team I'm connected. So it's tough. But anyway, to those people that make comments and say stuff, it just shows you don't get it. And I think I speak for the whole fan base. Until it happens to you, you probably won't, and we'd much rather you not get it. We'd much rather you just not understand what this does to a fan base. I mean, think about it. I don't think any other school can say this, but a freaking bucket list trip is to a cemetery for our team. Man, that's crazy. I knew I was going to get emotional too. Damn it. But yeah, it's crazy, man. This week, that cemetery is going to be packed. People going to pay their respects and stuff. It's real, man. It's 50 years later. It's still real. Sorry, guys. I tried to hold it together, man. I tried. Yeah, but it's a big week for us, man. And game day not coming. We're used to being overlooked. That's not the problem. If it had been Alabama or Oregon or Ohio State or wherever, that's fine. We're used to that. But you break the mold and you go somewhere. You go to another sport. It's just a slap in the face. But it is what it is. We can't change it. It doesn't, as annoying and as sad as it is, for us, it doesn't change anything. We're still gonna celebrate. We're still gonna honor them this weekend, and most importantly, we're gonna have a team take the field. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and looking forward to seeing Red. It's always good to see him, and thankful that we still have him, and we missed the other ones. So that's it for me, boys. I tried to hold it together. I tried. It's tough. It's really tough.
I don't know how that anybody is going to be able to follow that. I'm not trying to make light of what you just said, but I listened. Was hanging on every word, and some of the things that you were talking about started to transcend beyond sport for me because I have an 18-year-old son and who's ready to start his journey in life. And, it's thoughts like that, like, you send them off to do that and they may not come back. And that's kind of scary. You go off to college. I went off to college and my parents sent me off, and probably never occurred to them that he may not come back. They were just sending me off to the next chapter in my life. And so many parents do that every year to their children in whatever capacity and whatever path their child chooses, without a lot of those thoughts. And, that kind of hits home. And you talk about other perspectives of how many kids lost a parent or both parents, or, a community that lost so many leaders, so many influential folks within that community, a school that lost administrators and the leadership from its athletic program and its football team and its team at large. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And you're right. If you don't get it, then you don't get it. And you don't have to get it. That's fine. If you choose to make light of it, that's fine too. If that's what makes you feel good about yourself, then, whatever. That's just know that that's never going to affect a Herd fan, because honestly, they don't have time to worry about if you get 75 week or not. It doesn't register on their radar. They really don't care if you don't get it. And Casey's right. If you don't get it because it hasn't happened to you, then that's good, because you don't want it to happen to you. But I will say, from my capacity in my relations with Marshall and my relations with Western Kentucky, every so often we have those newcomers to the Moonshine Throwdown universe that feel like that's where they're going to make their mark. We're going to make a joke about that. And without question, the very first people to always come to the defense or to stand up for the Herd are other Topper fans. And it's kind of amazing, because those people get it. It hasn't happened to them, but they get it. So that's refreshing. But we're always going to have those people that think that's, not an off limits thing, and, whatever. But I will say, I wish that this was one that I could make the trip for. I think it would be awesome. It's unfortunate that we're in an attendance limited capacity this season of all seasons, that the memorial fountain ceremony is going to be limited, because I know there are just a lot of people that would love nothing more than to pack the Memorial Student Center Plaza and see that firsthand. I'm sure that Marshall will broadcast it. They've done that in the past, but it's not quite the same. I've been to fountain ceremonies in the past, and it's quite a moving experience. And I've been to the Spring Hill Cemetery. I've been to the Marshall Memorial, and it's one of those things that whenever you go there are always trinkets and keepsakes from other fans and fan bases. They leave something there, like a Purdue fan was here and they leave something with their logo on it or whatever the case may be, or a game ticket or something. And you're right. It's one of those things. People come to Marshall not only to see a game, not only to experience the nationally known herd hospitality, but they want to see the fountain. They want to see the Marshall Memorial. They want to see all those things that they saw in the movie We Are Marshall. It's just really, really special. And for all of those things, I do not envy Middle Tennessee State. For as much respect as they may have for Marshall, or a lack of respect, whatever their feelings are towards Marshall, you're in for the ass whipping of an eternity, as far as I'm concerned. Even if the score is closer than we all think it's going to be, this will definitely be an ass whipping on the field. Trace, your turn. Good luck topping what Casey has. I know that's not what we're trying to do here, but without question, unequivocally speaking, of all the segments I've recorded and all the episodes of all the podcasts and all the guests, that was by far the most genuine, heartfelt, gripping segment that I've ever had the honor to listen to and the dishonor to try to follow. So I saved you from that, Trace. You don't have to follow. I took that bullet for you. And folks, I will say, if there is a listener that is able to keep the lump out of your throat, and if you think that, and I don't mean this, I'm not making a slight at you when I say the word kid, because you said you're 23 years old. So if you think that it's not real for these college age kids, you think, wow, I'm an old guy. I was around for that. Well, I wasn't around for that. It was over a decade, right around a decade before I was born too. And it's still something that's, I can feel. But if you think that these kids, these college students, these players, that these points don't get driven home to them and they are not 100% aware of where they play, who they represent, and what they're doing, you're fooling yourself. And if those sentiments don't come through in what Casey just said, then you're just denying the fact that these kids get it. So Trace, 75 week.
What I mean, it means everything to Marshall football. It means everything to Marshall as a community, Huntington as a community, the school. I mean, it means everything. Like it's not hyperbole or cliche or anything when people say that kind of stuff. And I've said before on this podcast that it's him. I don't see how there's a more meaningful game, or meaningful obviously, but I don't think there's a more must-win game in sports really than when Marshall plays for the 75 and goes all out. I mean, it just takes on a life of its own. Casey is just amazing, eloquent soliloquy there, if you want to call it that. I mean, I echo everything he said. I mean, he said he's 23, I'm 26, and it means that much to us. That shows how important that it really is. That shows that it transcends everything. It's time. Like, it doesn't matter. We're all from Marshall. If you're a Marshall supporter, if you're a Marshall fan, it doesn't matter if you're 75 years old, if you're 40 years old, if you're 20 years old. It means the same to all those people. That's how big of a deal that it is. And like you said too, Katie, it's really cool whenever you go to the cemetery every once in a while. I'll, go up there because, and they'll be like, well, even in the new booklet that they put in the Herald Dispatch about the 50th anniversary that came out over the weekend, the picture of the memorial there was an Appalachian State thing there because someone from App State had visited. That was this year. And like I've seen that in the past with like different teams as well. It's like that shows that it really means a lot to the other fans to experience all that and take it all in. And I mean, obviously, it means a lot to Marshall fans, and that's I've said no so many times, probably even on this podcast over the last couple of years, that in my opinion, there's nothing that makes you more proud to be a Marshall fan than like watching We Are Marshall or any of that kind of stuff. There's nothing like it because you realize that like that's your school. Like that's the school that you went to. That's the school that you're a fan of. That's the school you've invested so much of your life into that they were able to come back from something that catastrophic and I mean, come out on the other side and completely overcome all the odds. I mean, it's basically if you would watch We Are Marshall and you had never watched it before, and if you didn't know it was a true story, you would think someone made it up because it just sounds that storybook and that Hollywood. But the coolest part about it is it's nonfiction. It's real. It happened. That's the part that really, really blows in your mind at times is you realize that stuff really did happen. They won on the last play of that Xavier game. They came back decades later and won more football games than any team in the country. They had all the success that they had. They had to rebuild the entire program with everything. Like it's hard to fathom that all of that happened, and it's hard to fathom that it still means so much to everybody. But it will, and it will. It does, and it will continue to mean the world to Marshall fans. That's why Marshall fans want. That's why I bought this fountain, right? This replica fountain that Hallmark came out with not long ago. That's why you get these things like these little mementos and things about it because it means that much to you. And you were asking me about one of the ornaments the other day. Like that's why it means a lot because it's everything for Marshall. Like it's for the fans. Like it's the coolest thing to be able to honor that and to keep that memory alive. And that's always going to be the case. And Doc has done an absolutely amazing job of honoring that and keeping that memory alive. And back on a little bit of football side, like over the last, I believe it's 7 years since 2013 was the first year that they brought out the 75 decals for the helmets and they really started going all out for it. That was against Tulsa on the road that year on November 14th. Since then, they've obviously won all the games, but by a combined average score of 38-15. I mean, they don't mess around when it comes to this. I mean, they're winning these games by 3 to 4 touchdowns on average. I mean, they play at a different level. The emotion it's there. They harness it well every year, and it's just wild to see how it is every year, and it never gets old. And I'm sure this year, I know it's going to be even better than it's ever been. Probably, it does suck that not everybody could go to the fountain ceremony, and I've been to several of them. I mean, heck, the picture right above my head here is me with Reggie Oliver. I mean, that shows how much. I mean, it meant a lot. I mean, that was he's not with us anymore, and it's cool to see how much it means to people. But even though you can't go to it physically this year, most of us can't. It's still going to be cool to see it, watch it, or live stream or whatever. So it's the best. Like it's the best that they do it. They do it first class. Everything about this week and weekend and game and everything regarding the anniversary, it's as first class as you can get, and it's great to see. And as far as the college game day thing, I was joking before this. I'm going to absolutely hound them like no other, and I know everybody else is too, because they deserve it. I mean, like it'd be one thing if Marshall was just some lowly subpar team this year, but Marshall's a 16th ranked team in the country. They're undefeated. It's the 50th anniversary of a huge sports moment in time that's going to live on forever. I mean, everybody should pretty much know about it at this point, even if you're not a Marshall fan, and they choose a golf tournament. I mean, it's just like Casey said, it's like that's kind of like a slap in the face. I mean, I know that's probably going to appease the masses and whatever, but they don't. Those people, you know what? They don't want to get it, and then that's their loss because we get it and we know how important it is. And all I'm saying is they better really do it up well with some type of video package or tribute or something. So they have a lot to live up to because Marshall fans are going to expect that. And you know what? Like I said, if they don't want to get it, then just let them not get it.
This is something that transcends farther than Marshall, though. This is what college sports is all about. Every coach that's worth his salt in the world talks about overcoming adversity. That's the message to the team. At some point, we're going to have to overcome adversity. And there is no greater overcoming of adversity in sports than this story. I mean, it just is. It's just such a missed opportunity for ESPN to do something really heartfelt and meaningful. And, whatever. You want to go to the Masters, go to the Masters. It doesn't matter. Marshall will not miss a beat. Fans from across the country, from all schools, will pay attention. They know the story. And, we don't need them. Let's put it that way. We don't need them. Every son of Marshall, every daughter of Marshall feels it this week a little bit more. There's a little bit different feeling in the air. The hits are going to be a little bit harder. The crowd is going to be a little bit louder. The emotion is going to be a little bit stronger. And the Herd's going to go out on a noon kickoff and put on an absolute show. I just feel that. I feel it in my bones. So, guys, let's get out of here. I don't think there's anything left to be said. We've driven the point home so well. Casey did such a phenomenal job. I would be surprised if there's not lumps in throats and tears being wiped away from cheeks as people are making their morning commute or their evening commute, because he gets it. And so many of you get it too. So what he said is going to just resonate through you, and it'll be just like, wow, yeah, he gets it. I get it. It's good that, the generation after generation of Herd fan this doesn't get lost on them. It just doesn't pass by the wayside because it's not, in fashion anymore to celebrate this. No, this is not who Marshall is, but it has made Marshall who they are. And they are the most resilient program, period. Prove me wrong. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We're just going to go. Later.